Thank you for joining us for this presentation through the Tennessee Public Health Association. My name is Rebecca Claypool, and I've partnered with Dr. Angela Bowman, Dr. Chandra Story, and Dr. Bethany Rye. This research was conducted through the Health and Human Performance Department at Middle Tennessee State University. The title of our research is An Investigation of the Perception of Change in Social Connectedness in Daily Life among Tennesseans during the COVID-19 pandemic. We aim to describe changes perceived by Tennesseans in their social connections in daily life during the COVID-19 pandemic, to identify some of the effects of COVID-19 on social connectedness among Tennesseans, and to provide you with applicable information to design post-pandemic community interventions using today's information. Social connections, meaningful work, and societal contributions are vital parts of holistic health. Most healthy individuals have access to these benefits through their typical daily lives. We know, though, that changes in daily life and social connections produce stress and can lead to health-related consequences or more severe diseases. This research presentation shows several perceived changes in social connectedness in daily life during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will also present participants' perceived adherence to CDC guidelines and changes to their typical activities. Upon IRB approval, our team surveyed 201 Tennessean adults to determine their perception of changes in social connections in daily life during the COVID-19 pandemic. All participants lived in the United States for the majority of the time between March and December of 2020. Participants were first asked to answer demographic questions before indicating changes from their typical pre-pandemic experiences regarding activities like volunteering, social and recreational activities, COVID-related changes at work or their faith-based community, and adaptations to daily life. 84.6% of our participants identified as white, and 11.4% identified as Black. Women accounted for 65.2% of our participation, and men for 31.8%. Approximately 3% of our participants preferred not to indicate their gender, preferred to self-describe, or identified as gender nonconforming. About a third, or 30.4%, of Tennesseans surveyed considered themselves members of a faith-based organization. Overall, Tennesseans reported several social disruptions in 2020. 56.6% reported less volunteering, 73% had fewer social or recreational activities, 70% spent less time socializing with colleagues, and 50% expressed more difficulty making new friends than would typically be true for them. Nearly all participants could access and understand CDC guidelines to mitigate the spread of COVID, and 92.5% reported implementing those guidelines. 85% of Tennesseans in the study indicated that they did have to adapt to differences in their daily activities. Several Tennesseans reported that their social situations were different from what they would typically expect. 80.5% perceived changes in their social relationships. Interestingly, most participants, about 73.8% or 3/4, would have engaged in more social events if more COVID precautions were taken at those events or put in place by organizers. Of 162 employed Tennesseans, 35.8% considered leaving their job due to COVID-related leadership decisions. Most Tennesseans associated with a faith-based organization did not consider leaving that faith-based organization because of leadership during COVID. However, 20.3% of participants in those faith organizations did consider leaving that organization because of COVID-related decisions. Very few differences were found among participants from urban, suburban, and rural areas. A smaller percentage, about 84.6% of rural participants, reported following CDC guidelines compared to 95.8% of suburban and 93.7% of urban participants. In conclusion, Tennesseans perceive that COVID-19 pandemic definitely changed both social connectedness and daily life. Fostering opportunities to reestablish connections among friends, colleagues, and faith-based organizations will be an important part of public health and community efforts post-pandemic. Thank you so much for joining me today.